All right, guys, welcome to the world through the Trivium. I am your host, Robert Wasman. Sorry for the delay. I had a quick issue. I have this cool intro that I wanted to have set up and ready to go. I got it all edited, but I don't believe I got it done correctly. So we don't have the intro. But the point is you're listening to the world through the Trivium. This is going to be an introduction to both myself, what I do, and the Trivium Method as a whole, and how it ties into voluntarism, libertarianism, and voluntarism. Now, there are some things that we need to lay down first. Okay, let me pull up my notes here. Um, the very first thing we need to set down is, who am I? Well, my name is Robert Wasman. I'm with the Journalistic Revolution. We also have JRev Radio, sister network to Voluntary Virtues Network. We strive to be an open source news organization that allows anybody to come into to come into what we to post. I'm sorry, I had to take care of something. But we allow anybody who gives us articles based on fact and logic and reason, no matter if we agree with them or not, long as they have those things, we will post these articles. We will be a voice for you. We will be a soapbox. Same goes with JRev Radio. We wish to give people voices, a lot like Mike Shanklin's view of what he wants to do with VVN. So, there was a lot in common there. I myself, I've always been a person in the crowd. I was never an organizer. I was never a speaker. I wasn't a journalist. I was just another body in the activist community. I was just another sign waver. I was just another protester. I did environmental protesting as a liberal in my younger years, protesting the clear cutting of old growth forest. I also did mountaintopping protesting, and eventually that led me to political protesting. Which eventually led me to Ron Paul, which seems to be a running theme on everybody's show tonight. And yes, I've listened to everybody's show tonight. And it seems to be a running theme that, that everybody came to it through Ron Paul, which, he often said that he was only a messenger anyway. So it makes sense. So what is the Trivium? Now, a lot of you, as soon as I tell you what it is, are going to be like, oh yeah, I use that stuff all the time. And I think that no matter what, either knowingly or unknowingly, critical thinkers all use this, just maybe not on every subject. But the Trivium Method pertains to the mind. It is the elementary three. You have your general grammar, your Aristotle's logic, and classical rhetoric comprise the first three rule-based subjects of the seven liberal arts and sciences. As these disciplines are learned and practiced together, they form the overreaching symbiotic system for establishing clarity and consistency. Let me turn myself up a little bit. Clarity and consistency of personal thought, and it's called the Trivium. Now, what do I mean about general grammar, Aristotle's logic, and classical rhetoric? Well, general grammar, when being used in this sense, answers the question of who, what, where, and when of a subject, discovering and ordering facts of reality that compromises basic and systematic knowledge. You'd say that's a table, and you know what a table does. It holds things. It's a surface. You eat on it. You decorate it. You put things on it. Lighting, all kinds of stuff. You know what the table does, and you learn what it is. Then you use Aristotle's logic, or better known as formal logic. This answers the why of a subject, developing the faculty of reason and establishing valid, non-contradicting relationships amongst facts. It's systematic understanding. For instance, using the table as an example, you have now established that a table is a surface for objects like plates, lighting, candles, even decorations. So if people were using it as beds, that would be a contradiction in what you understand from the grammar. So then you would know that if someone tried to tell you that you sleep on tables, that's inherently contradictory, and that is not true. Sorry for using the very layman examples. But so, excuse me. Moving on from there, we we moved into classical rhetoric. It provides the how of a subject. Applying knowledge and wisdom, knowledge and understanding expressly compromises wisdom, or in other words, it is systematically usable knowledge and understanding. Usable, applicable, real world scenario. Grammar, logic, rhetoric. You have to know the words that you are using. You have to use logic and remove all inherent contradictions from the basis of your grammar. And rhetoric, you have to wisely apply that knowledge through communications or into real world scenario. So why the trivium? Why am I pushing this? Why should you look at the world through the trivium? All right. Discovering and order facts of reality compromises basic systematic knowledge, not only the rules developed and applied to the ordering of the word and concepts for verbal expressions in communication, but it's our first contact with consciousness, our conscious order as such. This is the initial self-conscious technique used in properly, discursively, or sequentially organizing a body of knowledge from raw, factual data for the purpose of gaining understanding through logic, of course, and thus also organizing the individual human mind. It is the foundation upon which all other methods of organization and order are built. Understanding the subject matter of anything. Now, of course, there are two types of grammar. You have special grammar, which properly relates words to other words within specified languages like English, Russian, or Latin. So you have your special grammar, the root of a word, and general grammar, which relates words to objective reality in any language and applies to all subjects as the first set of building blocks to be integrated or fully mindful objective knowledge. A body of knowledge which has been gathered and arranged under the rules of general grammar can now be subjugated to logic for full understanding, which emphatically is as a separate intellectual procedure. So remember, grammar is not logic. Understanding the meaning of a word does not mean you know how to use it in logic. So these are separate intellectual procedures. Now, like I said, grammar answers the who, what, where, and when of a subject. Like right now, who are you listening to? You're listening to Robert Wasman. He's a philosophical voluntarist, political libertarian, and personally, he's a deist. So using the definitions of those words, a voluntary is someone who believes that all human interaction should be completely voluntary. A political libertarian, someone who wants to remove government in any facet of his life that he can. And a personal deist, I believe in a deity, if you will. I think that the observable universe is enough proof for that. I just reject all matters of religious truth. So now you know where I'm coming from. You know the who. What? All right. What is it that you are listening to? You're listening to me speak about the trivium. Where? At your house. When? Right now. So now that you know all those subjects, you can move forward into logic. The answer is, which answers the why of a subject. Okay, now, like I said before, developing the faculty of reasoning and establishing valid, i.e. non-contradictory, relationships among facts yields basic systematic understanding. Now, this is where you come to the why. It is a guide for thinking correctly, thinking without contradiction, more concisely, or better known as cognitive dissonance, More concisely, it is the art of non-contradictory identification. The work of logic is proof. Proof consists of establishing the truth. And for the remainder of this show, understand that truth, at least by the definition that I understand, is what was and what has happened, or what it is and what is happening. That is truth. Okay? And validity of a concept or proposition in correspondence with objective factual reality by following a self-consistent chain of higher self thought back down to foundational. So using the same factual reality, following a self-consistent chain of higher level thought, and then back down to foundational thought, primary concepts or axioms like existence, consciousness, causality. It is a means of keeping us in touch and grounded to objective reality in our search for valid knowledge and understanding. Logic brings the rhythm of the subjective thoughts of the mind and the subsequent actions of the body into harmony with the rhythm of the objective universe. The intention is to amicably synchronize individual mental processes and their attendant actions with the processes of our surrounding natural factual existence over a period of time. All right, lots of big words, right? Lots of lots of fancy talk, if you will. Now, so basically, I mean, most of you should understand logic. And if you're in the liberty movement, or if you're a voluntarist, anarchist, or libertarian, I would assume that you understand some level of logic. You know, like how you apply it to regulation. Oh, you want something to be free, so you're regulating it? That doesn't make much sense. You don't want people to have guns, so you want people with guns to go and take guns away from people. That's not logical. It's contradictory. Rhetoric provides the how of a subject. Applying knowledge and understanding expressively comprises wisdom, or in other words, it's systematically usable knowledge and understanding. To explore and find the proper choice of methods for cognitively expressing the conclusions of grammar and logic on a subject in writing or in oral argumentation, the enunciation of those conclusions is called a statement of rationale. A set of instructions deduced by the rationale for the purpose of application of those conclusions in real world is called a statement of protocols. Now, so protocols, as you know, are a set system of things that have to be done for you to achieve another goal. Perfect example is I was late coming on this show because I had not made myself fully aware of the protocols to making sure that I was broadcasting live and well. And for that I was late. It's causation. So, I mean, basically, without grammar, without logic, and without rhetoric, you cannot properly apply things in the real world. Now, how does that pertain to you, the anarchist, libertarian, or even liberty-leaning person watching this show right now? I don't even know how many there are of you. I should probably check that. I got 3 of you. Awesome. Okay, so how does that apply to you? I'm sure you're asking that. Well, let's first look at the word government. Government is the Latin verb gubernare and the Latin noun mente. Gubernare meaning to control, and mente meaning the mind. So government literally means to control your mind. We'll come back to that because it's important. But let's look at the word liberty. I'm sure all of you are aware of what liberty is, or at least you understand the concept of it. I'm sure that you said that you're a part of the liberty movement, or you're a libertarian, or that you've used this word quite a bit. I'm sure all of you have heard the famous phrase, "Give me liberty or give me death." Well, liberty comes from the Latin word libere. And libere in the noun version means book, and the verb means freedom. So according to the ancient Greeks and the Romans, um, knowledge was the key to freedom. The perfect example of this is in Plato's cave. Plato, when trying to describe enlightenment in understanding and education, or in Latin, in the Latin verb, I believe educare. I might be screwing that one up. I don't have my note on it for right now. But the Latin root word for education means to rear up, or to bring in, or to lead out. So taking the allegory of the cave, these people are in darkness. They only know their own shadows. They only know their own chains. They have no desire or will to see if there's anything else, because this is all they know. And it wasn't until a man was able to free himself from the chains and go into the outside world, and where he was enlightened, and he went out and he understood it and he learned the new world, he went back into the cave and he had to lead them out. There are many debates about how one should be led out of the cave. You have everything from the brutalist libertarians who think words do not hurt, which I tend to agree with, as far as physically, and all the way to the coddling and caretaking, if you will, of individuals to lead them out. Oh, come with me, hold their hand, kind of thing. So if the government is to control your mind by the very definition of the word, and liberty is books or knowledge and freedom, then the trivium is the method in which to use mental self-defense against monopolizers of force, violence, and coercion. It is a way of mental self-defense against propaganda. It is a way of self-defense against mistruths. It is a way to critically come to your own conclusions and be on par with the very philosophers that you read, watch, and listen to daily. To give you a reason why I think this is so important, and I've been wanting to do a show strictly around the trivium and why it's so important to voluntarism, is because one of the problems I see is we all tend to parrot our heroes. We all tend to sit around agreeing with each other and, oh, yeah, Adam Kokesh said that, I completely agree. Well, Stefan Molyneux said, and I completely agree. At no point are you adding anything to the conversation. And I think that's time to change. I think it's important that changes now, and it changes quickly. And I hope to educate you in this method of thinking. I hope to enlighten you to where you'll think on your own, to where I'm no longer necessary. I mean, honestly, I want you to listen. I want all the listeners to hang out and chill with me. And in the future, I'll be taking calls and having guests and so forth and so on. But eventually, I would like to see the viewership for my show alone. I won't speak for Voluntary Virtues or JRev Radio. But for my show, I would like to see 0 listeners. And that's because you guys are way too busy out there educating the masses. I know it seems counterproductive for somebody who's in media, but I mean, that would be an ultimate goal. These shows would not need to exist if we lived in a free world, if we lived in a critical thinking world, if we lived in a world without coercion, without violence, without monopolies over certain ways of thinking and forces and products and all that stuff, and economic interventionism, all that jazz. You all heard it before. Now, the trivium has a long history, a historical history that you can look into. And I'm going to give you some places to go. You can go to tragedyandhope.com or triviumeducation.com. You also have peacerevolution.org. and Gnostic media if you really want to dig deep. But according to Tragedy and Hope, they say, and I quote, "Would you first break the legs of a lamb and then kick it because it could not stand up thereafter? We are now witnessing the accumulating and negative effects of omitting the three means of learning how to learn, which constitute the integrated classical trivium, the first three of the 7 liberal arts." If you went into college right now and you're getting your bachelor's or master's in arts, you learn all 7 of these liberal arts. And remember, liberal, root word liber, meaning knowledge, book, or freedom, in the sciences. The last 4 constituents are called the quadrivium. And the quadrivium is quite simply just physics, chemistry, history, and philosophy. Or no, I'm sorry. Mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy is the quadrivium, which are based, all of those can be understood through the trivium itself, which is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Now, grammar is knowledge of that which exists. The answers to who, what, where, and when, those exist. Those are truths, real world truths. Logic is an understanding of the interrelationships of that which exists. Bob doesn't like Sarah. Rhetoric is communication of grammar and logic, and it provides the how. If a person has not yet been exposed to this method, it is difficult to communicate to him the serenity of mind and self-assurance, or even spiritual abundance, if you will, caused by the competence to appropriately validate one's own thinking, as well as the thinking and doctrines of others. Therefore, it must be experienced. It is stressed. The trivium forms a habitual and methodical pattern of mind of how to think effectively, not what to think. It gives one's mind an ever-improving map which corresponds to the terrain and is always improving itself for the purposes of your survival and satisfaction in life. As an added bonus, there's it is a serene pursuit, because this is a method devoted to the how of thinking. It is not controversial. It is in the topics of what to think, religion, literature, philosophy, modern science, where controversy reigns. The problem is general education has not been the focus of contemporary schooling establishments, but rather social engineering. It is a vile and protracted form of miseducation. Now, why is this important? How many libertarians, voluntarists, and anarchists would tell you that ever since the state has taken over the education system, intelligence levels in this country have fallen, and have fallen dramatically. And lots of them, some will say that it's accidental, or that's just the result of the state taking over anything. But I disagree. I think it is deliberate. It is the deliberate dumbing down of people, and we're going to find out why throughout the history of the trivium. After adopting the Prussian education method in America in the middle to late 19th century, this fault in educating our nation from the perspective of general citizenry was compounded by applying the dangerous tenets of the pragmatic philosophy devised by William James and John Dewey. I recommend that you word search pragmatic philosophy and Prussian education on Google, but we'll get into that a little bit. The party line is that children need to be surrounded by their peers in order to socialize properly in preparing them for life. Socialization is a natural process to people. It doesn't need to be taught to them, or more to the point, programmed in them. Children need to be around family, neighbors, and a few close, genuine friends when younger, and participants in church or social or civic or charitable organizations in adolescence. Friends and organizations just described have their time and place in a young person's life. They're not all-consuming institutions as modern primary and secondary schooling establishments try to make themselves. They are self-serving, domineering social entities which perceive a gain from having general populations presented with only the protocols of a field of study, and to have withheld the rationale of that field of study, the knowledge of rationale of subjects for understanding, and the protocols for the expression or application of those subjects compromises what is addressed in general education. Now, I want to get into the Prussian industrial model because I brought that up, Prussian education. Well, first off, what is Prussian? Well, it simply means from Prussia. This Horace Mann is credited as the father of the American public school system, studied a wide variety of educational models before implementing the Prussian system designed by Frederick the Great of Prussia. King Frederick created a system that was engineered to teach obedience and solidified his control. Focusing on following directions, basic skills, and conformity, he sought to indoctrinate the nation from an early age. Isolating students in rows and teachers in individual classrooms fashioned a strict hierarchy, intentionally fostering fear and loneliness. Mann chose the Prussian model. Going back to Horace Mann, he was the one who is credited as the father of the American public school system. With its depersonalized learning and strict hierarchy of power, because it was the cheapest and easiest way to teach literacy on a large scale, which is utter crap. I doubt that completely. It was mostly because that the model was designed in isolating students and creating fear and creating an educated slave race. Building upon the depersonalized uniformity and rigid hierarchy of the Prussian system, they constructed an industrial schooling model designed to produce millions of workers for Americans' factories. Believing that most American students were destined for a life of menial industrial labor, these theorists, people like Elwood P. Cublery and others, right, created a multi-track educational system meant to sort students from an early age. While the best and brightest were carefully groomed for leadership positions, the majority was regulated to a monstrous education of rote learning and task completion. Consequently, our school system is still locked into the Prussian industrial framework of fear, isolation, and monotony. For both students and teachers, procedure is emphasized over innovation, uniformity over individual expression, and control over empowerment. It is therefore not surprising that the majority of American classrooms have changed little in over 100 years. Now, give you a little history. During the 18th century, the Kingdom of Prussia was amongst the first countries in the world to introduce tax-funded and generally compulsory primary education, comprising in an 8-year course of primary education called the Volksschule. It provided not only the schools needed in an early industrialized world, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which replaced grammar, logic, and rhetoric, but also a strict education of ethics, duty, discipline, and obedience. Affluent children often went to attend preparatory private schools for an additional 4 years, but the general population had virtually no access to this secondary education. Now, why am I bringing up the Prussian education system? It is because that system occulted the trivium knowledge. And what is occulted? It comes from the Latin word oculus, which means to hide away or hide or in the dark. So anything that is occulted is literally just hidden knowledge. Excuse me. Bear with me one second there, guys. Now, we've been taught that the occult is horrible, it's bad, it's evil, Satanism, paganism. It's stuff you got to be aware of and make sure you stay away from, which these elites, people like Aristotle and Plato, actually kind of set up this structure where only the free men, the Greek citizens were allowed to learn, not the slaves. And so they occulted this knowledge that only the chosen few were allowed to know. In the Prussian education system, instead of being taught how to think, to use grammar, logic, and rhetoric, no matter what the subject, it's simply stimulus reaction, um, statement memorization. These things will not create a critically thinking society. They create a dumbed down society. And why is that? You need an educated slave race. To give you a perfect example, at one time, architecture was occulted knowledge. Only the elite of the elite were allowed to study it and know it and use it, and they had to use slaves to build it. Let's use the pyramids of ancient Egypt. Now, the slave had to be educated enough to know where the keystone went. The slave had to be educated enough to know how to put the pillars up, how to do these things, but uneducated enough to where he could build it on his own. Only the architect was allowed to know the blueprints. Only the architect was allowed to know the geometry. Only the architect was allowed to know the math. All of that at one point was occulted knowledge. Math was occulted knowledge. Architecture was occulted knowledge. Geometry was occulted knowledge. And the reason it was held back and away from the masses is because it gave power over one's person. If you did not understand how crops work, then you could say it was because of the tornado rain gods and that you need to give me sheep and I will make it rain, and then you just open up the irrigation or so forth and so on. It was a form of control. If someone doesn't know something, you have leverage. So going back into the Prussian education system, it has pietist influence. Pietism, a reformist group within Lutheranism, forged a political alliance with the King of Prussia based on mutual interests in breaking the dominance of the Lutheran state church. The Prussian kings, Calvinists amongst Lutherans, feared the influence of the Lutheran state church and its close connections to the provincial nobility, while the pietists suffered from persecution from the Lutheran orthodoxy. Bolstered by royal patronage, Pietism replaced the Lutheran Church as the effective state religion by the 1760s. Pietism theology stressed the need for inner spirituality, which can only come through reading the scripture. Consequently, Pietists helped form the principles of the modern public school system, including a stress on literacy. They want you to be able to read the words. They don't want you to understand the words. A series of edicts made clear for the first time that education was a task of the state. Now, remember, this was back in the 1700s, around 1763, when Frederick II made schooling compulsory for all children between the ages 5 and 13. Though through Prussian ministers, particularly Karl Abraham Friars von Zelleth, I'm probably screwing that word all up, sought to replace local control over schooling with centralized uniform system administered by the state during the 18th century. Not until the implementation of the Prussian General Land Law of 1794 did the state first attempt to take responsibility for the educational institutions. All schools and universities were made institutions of the state. Does that sound familiar? It sounds a lot like what we have today. Everything about the state everything about the state, state education today, everything about college is state funded. They get state grants, they get federal grants, then they get federal loans for you. It's all government controlled from kindergarten until college. Now, what they did is they occulted this knowledge and they put it in certain groups. Groups like Skull and Bones, other secret societies within Ivy League institutions, even Masonry, teach sacred geometry. They teach the Trivium. They teach grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And the better you are at it, the higher you get up in the fields. So what does this mean? Because I'm blowing through a lot of history right now. I highly recommend you go to triviumeducation.com, you go to tragedyandhope.com, even the newamericanacademy.org. Go there, look up about the Prussian industrial model, Google it, look into it, and then also you know, anything that you can look into about the Prussian education, the trivium in occulted terms. Good people to look into are Mark Passio, James Corbett, Jan Irvin in Gnostic Media. These people have done their research. These people make me look like an idiot. Um, but why do we have heroes? To one day become better than they were. So look into this information. The reason I say it's important is because it is the root of all conspiracy. Why are you being controlled today? Why is the state able to tell you how to live? Why are so many people just going along with it? Why do we even have a term like sheeple? Why were we ourselves once these sheeple? And it's because you were indoctrinated. They took your young, impressionable mind, and instead of teaching you how to use it, they filled it full of a bunch of crap. They told you lies about your history. They told you lies about your presidents. They taught you lies from the very beginning. You're taught about the tooth fairy. You're taught about Santa Claus. Your parents are forced almost by the state and federal mandated holidays to teach you that even they are untrustworthy because they're willing to lie to you. So, you know, it's excuse me. It's important that you put all this together and you learn how to think effectively, because it sets up a mental barrier. Let's use the Illuminati symbolism, the owl, right? When Alex Jones went into the what's that group out there in the Redwoods? Not the Bilderbergers, but the other guys, the Bohemian Grove, right? When he got in there, they were worshiping an owl, the owl being the representative of their pagan god Molech, and they were doing the cremation of care, and I'll get more into that later in other episodes. But they were worshiping the owl. Why the owl? Well, according to cultic knowledge, it's because the owl can see in the dark. He knows something that the average person does not. He is enlightened because he can see further, better in the dark, and that he has a 360-degree head swivel. That's the reason. Is it because the owl's evil or the owl represents the devil? No, that's it. They are literally throwing it in your face that we know something that you don't, and because of that, we can control you. That's really what it boils down. It's like before you became libertarian, you were something else. You were a conservative, or you were a liberal, or somewhere in between, or the many shades in between. And it wasn't until you heard an idea that clicked, that made sense to you, that was logical. And someone said, yeah, I'm a libertarian. What's a libertarian? You learn the grammar. Then they were like, this is a libertarian. It is the philosophy that you own yourself, you own your property, and the product of your labor, and that nobody has the right to tell you what to do. And you understood the logic. It is not contradictory. And now it's time for us to use the rhetoric. It's time for us to apply this. And that's why you should listen to Voluntary Virtues Network. That's why you should check out the podcast. You should check out my show, jrevradio.com, and you should check out the Journalistic Revolution, and all of our other great shows that we have on there. And the reason you should do this is because you should hear what we have to say, and then you should argue against it. Or you should argue for it, but you should expand upon it. You need to bring something to the table of discussion. And then not only do you have to be able to communicate these philosophies and ideas appropriately and effectively, you need to bring in real world action. When Shanklin decided more people needed a voice, boom, he made a network. Real world action. When we did the same thing, boom, we made a network. When we decided we needed a voice and we wanted other people to be able to have a voice, we started the Journalistic Revolution LLC. When I realized that we were being spied on all the time, I protest against red light cameras. I do cop blocking. I go to Liberty events. I interview people. I find out there. I put their ideas out there and create media. I still am that body in the crowd, but now I'm that body in the crowd who can see through the bullshit. I don't know if I should. I don't know if that's allowable But still, the point is that you got to see through the fog. And I want people to start applying it and applying it effectively. We get it, okay? Fellow libertarians, voluntarists, and anarchists, we get it. We get what freedom is. We know the desire of it. We know how it makes us feel. We're all passionate. That's great. We're passionate. But passion does not fix the world. Democrats have passion. Conservatives have passion. The neocons have passion. The elites who control the world have passion. But what is it that they have that we don't have? It's occulted knowledge, truth, the understanding of what has happened and what is. And they understand how to think and apply it and use it effectively. Now, I also want to say, just because you know the truth, just because you understand a philosophy, doesn't mean you're a critical thinker. And just because you're a critical thinker doesn't mean you necessarily understand a philosophy. And mental self-defense is not guaranteed without both of those things, both the understanding of a philosophy and the critical thinking skills to go with it. You need to we have figured out many ways to defend ourselves in the real world. You have cryptocurrencies to help defend against the economic system. You have gold and silver for the same purpose. You have encryption programs to protect your privacy. You can grow your own food, get your own solar panels. But what are you doing to protect your mind? What are you doing to make sure that you don't fall for just any old conspiracy theory or any old philosophy? How does one make sure that that doesn't happen? And I have no other answer for you except critical thinking. And that can be achieved systematically through the trivium. Understanding the language, understanding the logic, and being able to apply both of those into the real world. That is how you defend against it. Once I knew what fiat currency was, once I understood what it does, once I understood how they take it from me, once I understood how they spend it, once I understood that, and I understood American money, American dollar equals fiat. What is fiat? Fiat is false, fake, not real. And once I understood what they're doing with it, they're killing people, they're murdering people, and paying people to steal and kidnap and murder other people. I did something about it. Once I understood the terms, the grammar, once I understood the logic, removed all inherent contradictions, and knew the why, I had to apply the how. How the hell do I get out of that system? Boom, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. I'm trading. I'm looking at my numbers right now, and we're doing pretty good over here. Yeah, we got plenty of Bitcoin. But, you know, and it's at 589.65 if you are currently wondering, per Bitcoin. But you have to have action at the end. That is what the rhetoric is. And so a perfect example is I hear anarchists and voluntarists talk against force quite often. And I hear them using the word violence interchangeably as if they were one and the same. That force is violence and violence is force. Well, that's not entirely true. Force is the application of one's will or energy to achieve a goal in the outside world. For example, you use force to dig a hole to plant a seed to grow a crop. That is all an expenditure of energy to affect the outside world. Even manipulate, you can say. Now, violence is the application of force with the intent to do damage or harm. Damage or harm? Why an or there? Isn't damage harm? Isn't harm damage? No, damage implies property, possessions, things. Harm implies person, physical, body. So to give a good example of how force can be violence and violence can be force, but they are not mutually exclusive. Give you a bad example of force. The man on top of the pyramid gives the orders down to the generals. The generals give the orders down to the sergeants and the lieutenants, and they give the orders down to the grunts to kill somebody for smoking a plant. Now, the grunt did the killing, but he was just following orders. Now, that's not an excuse. That man is still just as liable. But is not the man who gave the order in the first place just as liable? Was not his force violent in nature because it was done with the intent to do damage or harm? Now, an example of good force. I use my energy, time, and will to plant gardens and give away that food. I have forced this food into existence and I have given it away. That's force. There is a proper time for the application of defensive force. Now, again, there's a reason there's an adjective in front of this word. Force is not inherently evil. Evil is inherently evil. Aggression is inherently evil. Violence is inherently evil. Force is not inherently evil. It's inert. It's like a gun. It doesn't do anything on its own. It is the intent behind it. Now, it's a slippery slope when you try to say, well, I could force somebody to eat. It's for their own good. I do not have the intent to harm. But you do cause harm when you take away somebody's right to choose. Your choice, your free will, is the only real freedom you have. Your mind is the only real freedom you have. Because here in the real world, anybody can take your life from you at any moment. And in reality, there's probably very little you could do about it if someone just walks up behind you and puts one in the back of your head. But the point I'm trying to make is that force isn't inherently evil. And I think I lost my train of thought there. Let me pull up my notes. Okay, yeah, force is not inherently evil. It is literally power or strength possessed by a living being, or the strength and power exerted upon an object. Physical coercion or violence, to use force to open a window. You can be violent with a thing. For instance, we were on our roundtable discussion and someone said theft is not violent, and someone disagreed, and I had a day to think about it. And I'd have to say, well, it depends on how the theft took place. Theft takes place in either one of two ways, through fraud or through violent force. Fraud by lies and deceit, manipulation, or like say I break a window to get into your home. I have violently entered your home and taken your property. I've committed an act of violence, but it was theft. But it was a violent action. It was violent force. Now, according to the etymology of the word force, in the Latin, it means fortis, which just means strong, strength. That's force. So violence and force are two very, very different things. Remember, liberty, liber, books, knowledge, freedom, comes from here first, comes from your mind, comes from your brain, whichever your consciousness, your awareness. I think, therefore I am. And there is a way to think. There is a method of thinking, and that is the trivium. Because there is a group of individuals calling themselves the government, the gubernamente, the controllers of your mind, who want to control you. And they do. They already do. Depending on how critical your thinking skills are. If you're a big L, no offense to my big L libertarian friends, but if you're a big L libertarian, you still work within the state. You still work within government. You still think that controlling people's mind is a good idea. But as you move along, and you'll come to small L libertarianism, and you understand a little bit more that control, violence, and controlling of the mind isn't what you want, because you don't want it to happen to you. And so it is therefore logical to not want it to do it to others. So without the trivium, without your grammar, without your logic, and without your rhetoric, you're going to end up just an animal. Stimulus, reaction, cause, and effect. There's no processing. The brain is a computer. It has input, it has processing capabilities, and it has output. That's the trivium. Input, grammar, processing, logic, output, rhetoric. This is the only way to think. It is the only way to think properly and effectively that is constantly improving upon itself, because you're constantly changing your grammar. Or I'm sorry, let me rephrase, not changing your grammar, perfecting your grammar, perfecting your logic, removing contradictions, getting rid of the cognitive dissonance, and you owe it to nobody at that point. You won't owe it to Stefan Molyneux for waking you up. You won't owe it to Ron Paul for showing you the light. You won't owe it to me for introducing you to the trivium. You won't need anybody else except for to communicate to and to bring into the light, to bring them out of the darkness, to use occulted knowledge to be the owl, to see through the darkness, to understand there are things around us besides just the blackness, and lead people, truly lead by example, not through force, and not. A true leader shows what you could be. Bad leaders tell you what you should be. Well, I got 2 minutes left, man. It was fun. I'm gonna have more shows. I'll post show notes in the description and the links, so that people can go and look this stuff up for themselves. You can see us over at journalisticrevolution.com and jrevradio.com. You can read my articles that I've written over at Journalistic Revolution. I highly recommend that you check out where we stand in history in two very different conclusions. Also, you can check out my videos at Journalistic Revolution at YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at the Journalistic Revolution and JRev Radio. And I'm going to end this on how we end all of our shows over at the Journalistic Revolution. Don't look to live free sometime in the future. Live free now.